Let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tearing into a high-yield medical study card all about Barrett's esophagus. Honestly, whether you're gearing up for medical boards or you're just, fascinated by the absolutely wild and sometimes super dangerous ways our bodies adapt to stress, you are definitely in the right place. Let's deconstruct the visual evidence together, step by step. Okay, so let's kick things off with the ultimate question right at the top of our source material. What exactly does Barrett's esophagus predispose a patient to? In medicine, just diagnosing a condition, that's really only half the battle. The true test of clinical knowledge is understanding the disease's trajectory. Like, where is it actually heading? What's the absolute worst-case scenario that we need to be actively trying to prevent? Keep that exact question in the back of your mind as we unpack this. To solve this little medical mystery, we've got to start at the root cause. Our high-yield pearl identifies this as chronic gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, which basically damages the distal esophagus. Picture the lower part of your esophagus, right? The tube connecting your throat to your stomach. It's supposed to be a one-way street for food, but chronic GERD turns it into this literal splash zone for harsh stomach acid. And think about it, stomach acid is strong enough to break down a massive steak dinner. So the delicate cells lining your esophagus, they are absolutely not built to bathe in that stuff day in and day out. This chronic ongoing irritation is the main catalyst for everything that comes next. All right, let's zoom out to the macro view. When a physician does an endoscopy, they're specifically looking for these really distinct, abnormal, salmon pink tongues of tissue extending upward. You can clearly see the contrast. That lighter, paler pink tissue, that's your normal, healthy esophagus. But those darker, angry-looking salmon pink patches creeping up, that right there is Barrett's esophagus. It's wild to think about, but the body is literally altering its own landscape in real time to try and cope with that constant acid exposure. And this perfectly illustrates the core mechanism of the whole disease. The body's normal stratified squamous epithelium is basically getting completely swapped out for an intestinal-type columnar epithelium. It's a defense mechanism. Normally, your esophagus is lined with these flat, stacked cells. That's the stratified squamous part. And they are fantastic at handling the friction of swallowing food. But they're terrible at dealing with acid. So, in a pretty desperate bid for survival, the tissue just swaps itself out for these tall columnar cells. These are super similar to the ones found in your intestines, simply because those cells are already built to survive in a highly acidic environment. Now, this total cellular swap has a specific medical name: intestinal metaplasia. It's a term we absolutely need to lock in before we look any closer. Metaplasia basically means the reversible replacement of one fully grown cell type by another. It's an incredibly sophisticated adaptation. Your body is basically saying, hey, the environment here changed, so I need to bring in a totally different crew of workers to handle the new conditions, which, sounds like a brilliant survival tactic. And honestly, in the short term, it kind of is. But here's the catch. This cellular identity crisis comes with a massive, potentially life-threatening hidden cost. Let's zoom way in now to the microscopic view. A pathologist actually confirms this diagnosis by hunting for these very distinct goblet cells nestled right within the tissue. If you look closely at those highlighted circular areas, they almost look like little empty white bubbles or cups. Those are the goblet cells. They get that name because of their cup-like shape, and their main gig is to secrete protective mucus. Finding goblet cells right here is the definitive, undeniable proof of intestinal metaplasia. The moment a pathologist spots these under the microscope from an esophageal biopsy, boom, the diagnosis of Barrett's esophagus is officially confirmed. So why does finding these tiny little goblet cells actually matter so much? Well, because having Barrett's esophagus increases the risk of esophageal adenocarcinoma by a staggering 30 to 125 times over the normal population. Just let that multiplier sink in for a second. We are not talking about a double or triple risk here. We're talking about a multiplier of up to 125. While that secular metaplasia was a really clever trick to survive the acid, it totally destabilizes the genetic environment of the tissue. These new out-of-place cells are highly volatile. They're super prone to further uncontrolled mutations, which essentially makes them a ticking time bomb for malignancy. Okay, time to test this knowledge with a past board question from NEAT PG 2021. Based on the massive cellular takeover we just witnessed, which specific cancer is this intestinal metaplasia a risk factor for? Are we looking at A, squamous cell carcinoma, B, adenocarcinoma, C, leiomyosarcoma, or D, lymphoma? Hint: think about those specific glandular, mucus-secreting cells that just moved into the neighborhood. Remember, cancers are named for the specific type of tissue they originate from. If we trace the whole journey, from the chronic GERD all the way down to those microscopic goblet cells, it becomes crystal clear. The answer is B, adenocarcinoma. Adeno refers to a gland. So since the esophagus literally replaced its normal flat cells with glandular, mucus-secreting intestinal cells just to fight off the acid, the resulting cancer is going to be an adenocarcinoma. It's like a giant puzzle, and this perfectly connects the root cause, the visual symptoms, the cellular adaptation, and finally, the severe clinical consequence. As we wrap up this explainer, it leaves us with a genuinely fascinating final thought. Think about it. If the human body can pull off such a drastic cellular identity swap just to survive chronic irritation, what other silent, high-stakes adaptations are happening inside us right now without us even knowing? Barrett's esophagus is a really profound reminder that our bodies are incredibly dynamic, always negotiating with the environments we expose them to. Sometimes, the line between a clever survival trick and a deadly disease is literally just a few cells thick. Keep asking questions, and we'll see you in the next explainer.